أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغن عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها هبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن يعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وظللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون
صلوات بر محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وأجل فرجهم जब चांद मुहर्रम का निकलता है फलक पर रोती है बहुत हजरत शब्बीर की मदर सरवर के अज़ादारों को वो चांद दिखाकर روتی ہے بہت حضرت شبیر کی مادر. آتی ہے عزاداروں کے گھر فاطمہ زہرا, دیتی ہے دعا شام و سحر فاطمہ زہرا. آتی ہے عزاداروں کے گھر فاطمہ زہرا, دیتی ہے دعا شام و سحر فاطمہ زہرا. ہر شہ کے عزادار کی قوت کو بڑھا کر روتی ہے بہت حضرت شبیر کی مادر. جب چاند محرم کا نکلتا ہے فلک پر روتی ہے بہت حضرت شبیر کی مادر. جب مجلس شبیر میں آتے ہیں عزادار, پیاسوں کے لیے اشک بہاتے ہیں عزادار. جب مجلس شبیر میں آتے ہیں عزادار, پیاسوں کے لیے اشک بہاتے ہیں عزادار. رومال عزاداروں کے آنکھوں سے لگا کر روتی ہے بہت حضرت شبیر کی مادر. جب چاند محرم نکلتا ہے فلک پر روتی ہے بہت حضرت شبیر کی مادر. آتی ہے سکینہ بھی عزا خانے کے اندر, غازی کے مصائب پہ بلکتی ہے وہ مضطر. آتی ہے سکینہ بھی عزا خانے کے اندر, غازی کے مصائب پہ بلکتی ہے وہ مضطر. آغوش میں معصوم سکینہ کو اٹھا کر روتی ہے بہت حضرت شبیر کی مادر. جب چاند محرم کا نکلتا ہے فلک پر روتی ہے بہت حضرت شبیر کی مادر. دادی سے یہ جب کہتی ہے معصوم سکینہ, یہ کون ہے کرتے ہیں میرے بابا پہ گریا. دادی سے یہ جب کہتی ہے معصوم سکینہ, یہ کون ہے کرتے ہیں میرے بابا پہ گریا. روتی ہے بہت یوں شہ کے عزادار یتیمہ سے بتا کر روتی ہے بہت حضرت شبیر کی مادر. جب چاند محرم کا نکلتا ہے فلک پر روتی ہے بہت حضرت شبیر کی مادر. جب چاند محرم کا نکلتا ہے فلک پر روتی ہے بہت شبیر کی مادر. قسمت پہ بہت ناز ہے غم خوار ہے بی بی, ہم سب تیرے بچوں کے عزادار ہے بی بی. قسمت پہ بہت ناز ہے غم خوار ہے بی بی, ہم سب تیرے بچوں کے عزادار ہے بی بی. جب کہتے ہیں واعظ یہ عزادار تڑپ کر روتے ہیں بہت حضرت شبیر کی مادر. جب چاند محرم کا نکلتا ہے فلک پر روتی ہے بہت حضرت شبیر کی مادر. جب چاند محرم کا نکلتا ہے فلک پر روتی ہے بہت حضرت شبیر کی مادر. نعرے حیدری یا علی, نعرے بوذری یا علی, نعرے صفدری یا علی, نعرے صلوات. اللہم صلی علی محمد وعلی محمد وعجل فرجہم.
والمحمد وآل محمد صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. کربل کی کہانی جب کوئی بھی سنائے گا, کربل کی کہانی جب کوئی بھی سنائے گا, سوکھی ہوئی آنکھوں سے ہے, سوکھی ہوئی آنکھوں سے آنسو نکل آئے گا. کربل کی کہانی جب کوئی بھی سنائے گا. ہر غم ملے گا تم کو آغوش نینوا میں، کیسی خزاں ہے چھائی زاغرہ کے باغباں میں. قرآن کربلا میں بکھرا نظر آئے گا. کربل کی کہانی جب کوئی بھی سنائے گا. اور اکبر سے نوجوان نے سینے پہ برچھی کھا کر رخ موڑ دیا کیسے بابا کو منہ دکھا کر. کیسے ضعیف بابا برچھی کو نکالے گا. کربل کی کہانی جب کوئی بھی سنائے گا. دریا تھا سامنے پر آلے نبی تھے پیاسے، بچوں کو بی بی زینب دیتی رہی دلاسے. لو جا رہے ہیں غازی پانی ابھی آئے گا. کربل کی کہانی جب کوئی بھی سنائے گا. اور پیاسے گلے پہ جس دم چلنے لگا تھا خنجر، معصوم ہچکیوں میں کہتی تھی کوئی رو کر، کوئی میرے دادا کو یثرب سے بلائے گا. کربل کی کہانی جب کوئی بھی سنائے گا. جب چل چکے تھے خیمے چادر بھی چھن گئی تھی، تو رسن میں یاور عابد کی زندگی تھی. منظر یہ غریبی کا تا حشر رلائے گا. کربل کی کہانی جب کوئی بھی سنائے گا. کربل کی کہانی جب کوئی بھی سنائے گا. پر محمد و آل محمد صلوات. اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد و الفاتحہ.
صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله صلى الله عليك يا ابن رسول الله روحي وجسمي وأرواح العالمين لك الفداء يا غريب ويا مظلوم كربلاء ثم السلام عليكم يا أهل العزاء الحسين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته مع الصلوات اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه تبارك وتعالى في كتابه المجيد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولا تحسبن الذين قتلوا في سبيل الله أمواتا بل أحياء عند ربهم يرزقون. Mu'mineen and Mu'minat, these are verses from chapter 3 of the Quran, Surah Al-Imran, verse number 169, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about those who serving Him and serve Him to that extent that they are killed, they are martyred. For them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do not consider them to be dead like any other person who dies naturally or in any other circumstance other than in service of Allah. Do not consider them like any other normally dying person. They are such that they are alive. And not only are they alive, but in the state in which they are, Allah provides them with sustenance. Yesterday, we talked briefly about those people who serve their communities. They serve when there is injustice, when there are trampling of the human values. Therefore, they stand up against those evil acts. And in their services, the consequences differ. Some of them end up being deprived of their rights, ending up in confinement in prisons. Others are such that they are deported and they leave their normal abode and have to go and live elsewhere. There are others who suffer, they become sick and incapacitated. But the highest stage is those who actually are slaughtered, they are killed. Those martyrs, therefore, who are killed, stand up at a higher stage in the eyes of Allah than all those who in one way or another serve Him, but the end is not giving up their lives. They may end up giving their freedom, they may end up giving up their material benefits, they may end up being harassed, but ultimately they do not go to that stage of being slaughtered, of being killed. Therefore, those who are killed get highest status. But even those who are killed depends upon the circumstances, depending upon their values for which they are fighting, depending for the reason for the uprising, depending upon the highest stage we saw is that these become heroes. They are alive in the senses even after their death, they continue to inspire, they become a source of inspiration. However, their roles we found is limited, some of them geographically, some of their contributions is locally, some of them nationally, some of them globally, but globally in the sense that it's international. It is very difficult to find the influence, the impact of a particular martyr or a particular person who has given all his life for the sake of justice and equity and equality, that they are honored and they are respected. But again, among certain sectors, certain section of society, It is very, very unusual to find somebody who not only crosses all the boundaries, national boundaries, international boundaries, becomes universal in the sense that he affects people of all walks of life in different eras. That we saw was Imam Hussein. And we mentioned that Imam Hussein's influence was not only among the Muslims, it is also among the non-Muslims. And those non-Muslims we found were not only of, say, politicians. There were politicians, there were activists, there were common people, there were people of different sections of life. Some of them, as we found out, Charles Dickens was a novelist. There is Iqbal, who was a philosopher and a poet. Then there are those who are prose writers. We saw different categories, different status in which Imam Hussein والسلام, affected. To an extent, we saw that these people acknowledge that Imam Hussein does not belong to one community, to the Muslims. No, he is of universal significance. We notice that. Today, we'll take one step ahead and see, but what is it in Imam Hussein? What is it that he did that rose him to that state of being of universal influence, not only in one age, but in different ages, to different peoples, of different sections of life, different walks of life? What is it that was in Imam Hussein that has raised him to that status? That we shall look at today. Imam Hussein والسلام, mentioned very clearly his goal behind standing up in his will that he left behind with his brother Muhammad al-Hanafiya. Part of that will is, this is what he says: وَإِنَّ لَمْ أَخْرَجُوا أَشِيرًا وَلَا بَطِرًا وَلَا مُفْسِدًا وَلَا ظَالِمًا وَإِنَّمَا خَرَجْتُ لِطَلَبِ الْإِصْلَاحِ فِي أُمَّةِ جَدِّي أريد أن أمر بالمعروف وأنهى عن المنكر وأسير بسيرة جدي وأبي علي ibn Abi Talib. This is what he said very, very clearly. What is it? This is the gist, this is the heart of his rising. This is the heart of what he did that has raised him ubiquitously. Universal value and at different ages that we saw last time. This is what he says when he is now leaving Medina and he is going to Mecca. And he says, I leave Medina. The reason why I am going out is not to create any mischief. Number one. Number two, I am not going out for corruption or to carry out injustice. My purpose, in other words, is above politics. My purpose is above material gain. My purpose is not to gain any status. My purpose is to do what? To reform the nation of my grandfather. Islah of Ummah. Not Islah of Muslims. Islah of Ummah of the Prophet. Meaning whoever at the time, then or today, considers to be part of the Ummah, community of the Prophet, this is for them. In other words, the rising of Imam Hussein was not limited in scope. It was to go there and bring about reformation in the society. This is exactly what he was after. And then he said, how do I do this? I intend to call towards virtue, amr bil ma'ruf, to call people from virtue in a society which was totally full of mischief, full of corruption, full of injustice, symbolized by the ruler Yazid ibn Muawiyah ibn Abu Sufyan, who was now an icon of an incarnation of evil and all the injustices that were there in society. Because of him, Imam Hussein was rising against them to call people towards virtue and to prohibit them from evil. Amra bil ma'ruf, nahi anil munkar. How? But this is what is behind this. What constitutes? What are the elements of this calling people to virtue and telling them to stay away from evil? What is it? What are the criteria? Then he defines. What is it? He says, asira bisirati jaddi wa abi Ali ibn Abi Talib. Based on the sunnah of the Prophet, the message and the teaching of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam, and the seerah and the way the Prophet showed it, and how Amirul Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib displayed it throughout his life, before he became Khalifa and after he had become Khalifa of the Muslimin. The system of Amirul Mu'mineen based on justice and equity and equality whenever it was possible. This is what Imam Hussein was going to do. How? Now, how there were about 6 different options that he had. Why did he choose the one which he did? Very briefly, we'll look at it. There were 5 different or 6 different options that he could have done to face Yazid ibn Muawiyah and uncover all the evilness that he was committing, and that it was incumbent upon Imam Hussein as a representative of the Prophet and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the surface of this earth as the Imam of the time to do that job. Hard job, but he had to do it. So when Yazid asked for him to do bay'ah, there are 6 different options that he has. Because people who were there, people like Abdullah ibn Abbas, his own brother Muhammad al-Hanafiya, Jabir Abdullah Ansari, they gave different advice, which were those options that they thought Imam should take, but he did not. What was this option? Option number 1. Option number 1 is stay in Medina. Just stay in Medina. Don't go anywhere. Just stay there and see what happens. And see if Yazid, there was a bluff. But later on we found out that this option was no good. Why it was not good? Because Yazid meant it. He was going to do what Imam Hussein had told those who were giving these options. Stay here. He says, you know what? I stay here or I don't stay here, wherever I go. Even if I go in a nest, hide in the hole of a snake, they will take me out and they will kill me. Imam Hussein therefore knew that because of what his refusal to accept Yazid would tantamount to him being killed. How he was going to save Islam before he's killed, that was the most important part of it. So he's staying in, if he stayed only in Medina, what would happen is what had happened to his father, to his mother, to his brother. They were all killed. And yet, for a long time, no one knew exactly who was behind it. This is what would have happened to Imam Hussein. If he had stayed behind, they would kill him. They would kill him and then they would put a blame on somebody else, as is happening today in this world. The evil people commit evil acts, and those who commit evil acts, those who are victims, are presented as the one who had committed these crimes. And this is what would happen in Medina, and Yazid would have said, you know what, Hussein finally agreed with me, therefore the injustices would continue and Islam would have been destroyed. Yazid and the way Umayyads were, historians know better, and that's why they say Hussein saved Islam, number one. Number two, he stayed in Medina and raised an army, resistance, that I am going to stay here. He was very popular. People loved him in Medina. He could have stayed and said, you know what? I am raising an army and I will face Yazid when overthrow him. But then this is what Imam Hussein had already seen before. What happened during the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen, he had seen it. He saw also what happened during the time of his brother Imam Hassan, that he would resist, but ultimately people would not support him. As we saw what happened to Hazrat Muslim in Kufa. In hindsight, we see that Imam Hussein, if he had stayed behind and if he had raised a resistance against Yazid, Yazid would have invaded Medina, as he did later on after the Shahadat of Imam Hussein. That when people did resist in Medina, Yazid sent his army, Muslim ibn Aqaba, and what happened in Medina, people know, historians have written, that the people of Medina, 1,000, those people who were very pious were killed. The mosque of the Prophet was closed for so many days. Donkeys and horses were tied in the mosque of the Prophet. And so many children were born from women who were violated, whose honors were violated. And that would have happened if Imam Hussein had stayed in Medina and had raised an army in Medina. This is what would have happened. Imam Hussein would have been killed, and the historians and everybody would blame him that it is he resisted, he stayed in Medina, he refused to give bay'ah, and this is what happened to Medina. The sanctity of Medina and the sanctity of Makkah, if he had stayed in Makkah, would have been violated. And that is what Imam Hussein was not prepared to do. And that is the reason why he did not take that option. Then there is a third option. And that option is go away. Just leave and go away. Go and live somewhere else peacefully. That would be possible. He could have lived somewhere far away and enjoy his life. But is this what was expected of him? He is the Imam of the time. Remember, the Prophet on the day of Ghadir had asked Ummah, don't I have a control, a more say over your lives, your nafs, than you have? Awla bit tasarruf. They said, Ya Rasulullah, well, yes. Therefore, the Prophet has a control and a right over the nafs of all mu'mineen. Whatever he says, he has to be followed. And that is what is the role of the Imam of the time. Therefore, if Imam had gone away, he would have saved his life. But that was running away from his responsibilities as the Imam of the time. That was not possible. He could not do that. People were thinking about him as a person, as his life. He was thinking about life of Islam. He was thinking of life of humanity. He could not run away. That option also Imam Hussein would not take. Therefore, there was another option, and that option was offered to him when he was on his way, when people came and told him, you know what, do not go to Kufa because situation in Kufa is very critical. Things have turned against you. This is when, after the martyrdom of Hazrat Muslim, that people have turned away from you. So why don't you do one thing? Let go to these places. There are places in Yemen, in some places, where people would support you. They will be with you all the time. And raise your army and then face Yazid. Again, the implication here was more or less political. That Imam Hussein was now fighting for, this is how historians, this is how the enemies of Ahlul Bayt would try to present his case. That Hussein ibn Ali refused to do bay'ah, and he went out and he raised his army and he fought Yazid. And again, what would happen to that army? As I've said before, people cannot be trusted. These people, a lot of them would have been bought off. Therefore, it was not, again, viable for Imam Hussein to go to raise an army wherever he was to go. So what was then left for him? What was there left for him was the way that he did. And that was two things that he did. Very, very interesting. One is he went to Makkah. And he did not stay in Makkah. Why? Because he's just staying in Medina doing nothing, and staying in Makkah and doing nothing would be the same consequences. Yazid had already prepared his own cohorts, his own spies, his mercenaries, who were supposed to go to Makkah and during the season of Hajj, whenever possible, wherever they saw Imam Hussein, kill him. And once he is killed, then Yazid would put the blame on whoever he wanted to. He said, you know what? Hussein was killed, and but we could do nothing. And he could even have gone to that extent of saying that, you know what, Hussein actually, before he was killed, he had already given me his bay'ah. He had already said, this is what Muawiyah had tried to say about Imam Hassan. And today historians, some of them do want to say it, that Imam Hassan did sulh because Muawiyah gave him money and he silently he accepted him. That's what would have happened if Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam would have stayed in Makkah. He would have been killed. Therefore, he left Makkah. And at the time when he is leaving Makkah, Abdullah ibn Zubair advises him, don't go stay here. He did not. And Abdullah stayed, and ultimately he ruled for some time. What happened to him? Ultimately, he was the cause. Yazid's army invaded Makkah, destroyed Khana-e-Kaaba, got Abdullah killed mercilessly, and the sanctity of Khana-e-Kaaba was violated. This is what Imam Hussein would not allow. And therefore, he decided to go. But before going that, Hujjah, to show Hujjah, this is Hujjah of Allah. O people of Kufa, you have written to me, and you have told me I am Imam of the time, and therefore it is my duty to come to you. There were some who had written a letter like this. Yes, there are others who had written to him saying, come here, the trees are full of fruits, come, there is richness here. Imam did not go for them. Imam, if he went, was for those letters in which Mu'mineen had written him, Ya ibn Rasul, you are Imam of the time. We need you at this time, and therefore join us. And therefore Imam joined them, decided to go, and therefore he said Muslim ibn Aqil. And what happened to Muslim ibn Aqil? We see what has happened. And this would have happened to Imam Hussein if he had stayed in Makkah. So what he did was he went out. He went from station to station. And what did he send? A message, a very, very clear message. The message was that I have refused to do bay'ah to Yazid ibn Muawiyah ibn Abu Sufyan, and that I have left for no other reason but to pass this message to you. This is Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahya anil Munkar. Do not follow the ways of Yazid. These are not the ways of Ahlul Bayt. These are not the ways of Allah that has shown us. Follow my ways and look at the way I am living. I have lived. Look at my life and look at what I have to do. And I am coming out not with an army. This is some of those non-Muslims who write about Imam Hussein. They say that if he was going out for any political gain, he would have taken an army. Would he take his family, his ladies? Would he take children with him? This is the strategy of Imam Hussein. To do tabligh of Allah, he was taking the best of those who are with him so that each of them could become an example for days to come, for those who were to live and see. Therefore, Imam Hussein went out, exposed Yazid, said everywhere that I cannot and I will not ever bow down to Yazid. I will not do it. I have not done it. Having exposed Yazid in this way, then Imam Hussein, if there was a way to save his life, to continue serving Islam, he was prepared to do that. That's why he said, my fate is in the hands of Allah. This is what he had said at the grave of the Prophet. Ya Allah, this is the grave of your Prophet. And you know I love virtue and I hate viciousness. And whatever you decide for me, I am accepting it. Meaning, if I expose Yazid and I succeed in establishing a situation where there is an Islah of Ummah, I will do that. However, if the consequences is for me, for martyrdom, I am for it. And this is what he had said earlier when he was leaving Makkah. All you people who are coming to me, remember we are going for a lofty purpose, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anyone of you who thinks that we are going there for any material benefits, then don't join me. Because what I am going there is for the sake of Allah. And I am eager to meet my ancestors, the Prophet, and my uncles Ja'far, and my father Ali. I am eager to meet. The way Yusuf, father of Yusuf, was eager to, Yaqub was eager to meet his son, I am also eager to go for my ancestors if it has to be like that. And then he exposed Yazid. Having exposed him, then he negotiated. Yes. Having done so, then he said, let me go. When the forces of Hur came to stop him, not to go to Kufa, he said, okay, then I won't go to Kufa. I go back to Medina. So that people should not say that his mission was suicidal. Ma'adallah. It wasn't suicidal. It was arranged that if Islam could be saved without him giving his life, then he would save it. And if he had to give his life, then he would give his life. And therefore, ultimately, he was martyred. And this is how these actions of Hussein here, all along the way, up to when he was in Karbala, and all the actions of Karbala, when people look at that, they say, this is a unique person. Not only did he save Islam, but he has saved humanity. The values for which he fought became a source of inspiration for all ages to come. Those people who found that they are facing injustice from a society, from an establishment, they always taught lesson from Imam Hussein. And this is what The reason why we saw Imam Hussein is referred to as Manawjati Natar and Har, that he is Abal Abrar. He is a fighter, father of freedom fighters. This is what Hussein ibn Ali is. And therefore, Imam Hussein left Medina all the way went to Kufa, Makkah, and then was going towards Iraq. When on the way at one manzil, one station of Zabala, and he said, or Zaruk or Zabala, one of those places where it is said, there is a narration that he said two people who had gone for Hajj had come back. And they report that we were just about to meet Imam Hussein. Then we saw somebody who came from Kufa. But when he saw Imam Hussein, this man turned his way. He went away. So we went after him and we said, you coming from Kufa? He says, yes, I'm coming from Kufa. What is the news from Kufa? He says, there are grave news from Kufa. What is it they say? He said, Muslim ibn Aqil has been martyred. Muslim has been martyred, and Hani ibn Arwa has been martyred. Then he said, and you know what has happened? They beheaded him. And they said his head is hanging at the door of the entrance of the city of Kufa. And more than that, they tied the bodies of Hani and Muslim and dragged them in the streets of Kufa. These people, so when we have heard this, we went to Imam. We did not know what to tell him, how to tell him. We went to the Imam, we did him salam, he looked at us, we look at him, and then we said, Yabna Rasulillah, we have some message to give to you, but it is something we prefer to do it to you in secrecy. There were certain companions, those people who had come with him were with the Imam. Imam looked at these two people and said, don't worry. Tell me whatever you have to say without me going into hiding. Tell me. He said, we have got some very, very sad news for you. This man whom we talked to has come from Kufa, and he tells us that Muslim has been martyred, Hani has been martyred, they have been beheaded, their bodies are being dragged in the city of Kufa. When Imam heard this, he said, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi rajiun. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi rajiun. Muslim, may Allah have mercy on you. You fulfill your duties. You did what you were supposed to do. May Allah have mercy on you. Then Imam Hussein went to the children of Muslim, Abdullah and Muhammad. He told them, oh Abdullah, oh Muhammad, I have said news for you. Your father has been martyred. Oh, sons of Muslim, your father has done enough. You can now take your mother and your sister and go away, go and live another life. These people are only after my blood. The children of Muslim responded, they said, no, Mawla, we will not leave you. We will stay with you, and whatever befalls you will befall us. Then Imam Hussein looked at those people who had come with him. He said, I am now going still towards Kufa. Those of you who want to have martyrdom, come with me. Otherwise, you are allowed to go. You can leave. It is said a few of them left Imam. Imam was now left with a very few companions. It is said that Imam called his sister Zainab, informed her of the martyrdom of Muslim, and then told her, come with me, let us go to Ruqayya, who is the sister of Imam and the wife of Hazrat Muslim. Let's go and convey this message to her. Imam Hussein went to in the khayma, in the tent where Ruqayya and her daughter Hamida was there. Imam went there, sat there, took his hand and put on the head of Hamida, the daughter of Hazrat Muslim. She was from the house of Ahlul Bayt. She saw this love and understood what it meant. She turned to Imam and said, "Oh Mawla, oh Mawla, what is the news of my father?" Imam said, "Oh Ruqayya, your father has been martyred. But oh Ruqayya, you are orphan, but don't consider yourself to be alone. Since now, from now onwards, I am going to be your parent, I am going to be your father." This was then on the day of Ashura, when Imam Hussein came to bid farewell, and when he called out, "Ya Zainab wa ya Kulsum, Ya Sakinatu wa ya Rabab, alaykunna min salam." What must have happened at that time to Ruqayya? What must have happened at that time to Hamida and to Sakina? They must have thought, "Baba, you are with us up to this moment. Now who is going to be with us?" Allah la'natullahi ala al-qawmi al-zalimin. Matame Hussein.
کربلا والوں کی زندہ سے رہائی ہو گئی، 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 تربت بالی سکینہ سے جدائی ہو گئی، کربلا والوں کی زندہ سے رہائی ہو گئی، اس قدر مارے تماچے حشمر بدکار نے، اس قدر مارے تماچے حشمر بدکار نے، حشر تک وہ موت بابا کی رلائی سو گئی، تربت بالی سکینہ سے جدائی ہو گئی، کربلا والوں کی زندہ سے رہائی ہو گئی، کربلا والوں کی زندہ سے رہائی ہو گئی، مومنوں منہ کو چھپا لو نوچ ڈالو سر کے بال، مومنوں منہ کو چھپا لو نوچ ڈالو سر کے بال، سر برہنہ دشت میں زہرا کی جائی ہو گئی، تربت بالی سکینہ سے جدائی ہو گئی، کربلا والوں کی زندہ سے رہائی ہو گئی، کربلا والوں کی زندہ سے رہائی ہو گئی، مثل پھولوں کی چنے تھے لاشوں کے ٹکڑے حسین، مثل پھولوں کی چنے تھے لاشوں کے ٹکڑے حسین، اس قدر پامال زہرا کی کمائی ہو گئی، تربت بالی سکینہ سے جدائی ہو گئی، کربلا والوں کی زنداں سے رہائی ہو گئی، کربلا والوں کی زنداں سے رہائی ہو گئی، اصغر معصوم کا وہ مسکرانا موت پہ، اصغر معصوم کا وہ مسکرانا موت پہ، دیکھ کے شرمندہ دریا کی ترائی ہو گئی، تربت بالی سکینہ سے جدائی ہو گئی، کربلا والوں کی زنداں سے رہائی ہو گئی، کربلا والوں کی زنداں سے رہائی ہو گئی، سر کٹا گلزار جب مشکل کشا کے لال کا، سر کٹا گلزار جب مشکل کشا کے لال کا، تا قیامت دین کی مشکل کشائی ہو گئی، تربت بالی سکینہ سے جدائی ہو گئی، کربلا والوں کی زنداں سے رہائی ہو گئی، کربلا والوں کی زنداں سے رہائی ہو گئی، کربلا والوں کی زنداں سے رہائی ہو گئی۔
اعوذ باللہ من الشیطان الرجیم، بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم، امن یجیب المضطر اذا دعاہ ویکشف السوء، امن یجیب المضطر اذا دعاہ ویکشف السوء، امن یجیب المضطر اذا دعاہ ویکشف السوء، امن یجیب المضطر اذا دعاہ ویکشف السوء۔
السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا نبي الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا سيد الوصيين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين أيها الشهيد بكربلاء، السلام على التسعة المعصومين من ذريتك علي بن الحسين زين العابدين، ومحمد بن علي الباقر، وجعفر بن محمد الصادق، وموسى بن جعفر الكاظم، وعلي بن موسى الرضا، ومحمد بن علي التقي الجواد، وعلي بن محمد النقي الهادي، والحسن بن علي العسكري. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والأمر والزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك، وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك، وجعلنا من أنصارك وأعوانك، ورحمة الله وبركاته.